everyone. Welcome to the Authentic Communicators Podcast. I'm your host, Camila Cable. This is Allie, Dylan, and Adam. And today we're here to talk about the yammy yammy. Now, I know that sounds foreign because who uses that? But we learned it from our great professor, Mr. Bob. Okay? And the yammy yammy is just simply your interpersonal communication, aka your self-talk. And this is a big topic and we don't really talk about it enough, but I think that you'll walk away learning something exciting and something you can take away in the future. So I'm going to start here with Allie. If you could just give us an overview about interpersonal communication.
Yeah, so interpersonal communication is the way that we talk to ourselves and the way we speak within our own minds. Often it's the way we process emotions, the way we process like the things that are happening in the world around us without sharing information with other people or the world, like people around us, or get like our initial thoughts on things. A lot of the time we use this to process our emotions as well as impact how we talk to the world around us.
That's really interesting you say that because from what I was reading with interpersonal communication, a big thing is really keeping a balance between the positive and negative aspects that come with it. And by doing that and embracing those different aspects, you can really gain a lot. Like with a positive aspect, you can really reduce stress levels in your life. And that really plays into how interpersonal communication is such a fundamental aspect of the life and of everything you do. And from an interesting source named Theodore S. Hoff of the Communicator in 1979, he brings up the concept of the intrapersonal communication being the baseline and the root for everything that we do in communication in general. So whether we're having a conversation between me and you right now, we both have the dialogue that we're speaking, but we also have that dialogue that's inside of us that's talking and formulating what we're saying and how we're going to say it. And it's really a testament to how important the interpersonal communication, how building that up really can solidify your life and different things and aspects in your life.
It's really interesting you say that because, first of all, you're completely right about interpersonal communication being the foundation. According to BerkeleyWellbeing.com, if your interpersonal communication skills are actually more fine-tuned, it actually leads to better forms of communication in other areas. It helps you improve your teamwork skills and your conflict resolution skills because you have a more accurate view of yourself and a more confident view of yourself, so you can approach situations with more confidence. But also something I think that's worthy to mention is interpersonal communication is continuously one of the most underappreciated and underrated forms of communication, simply because we do it the most by far out of any forms of communication. We talk to ourselves more than we talk about others. We talk negatively to ourselves more than anyone else. We talk positively to ourselves more than anyone else. And the fact that we do it so much and it's not nearly gets talked about, it will always be the most underrated form of communication.
Nice. I like the fact that you brought up like the authenticity factor of interpersonal communication, because the better your interpersonal talk or your yammy yammy talk, I think the more authentic of a person you'll be. So I want to switch back over here to Allie so we can talk more about positive and negative interpersonal communication. So you want to kick us off with the positive? Because I know you did some great research about the positive.
Yeah, so that positive and negative self-talk, those are the two main ways that we communicate within our own minds. Those are the ways we primarily process emotions and process our actions. Positive is the act of... Positive communication is the act of talking to yourself in an uplifting way. You're communicating to yourself, you're encouraging yourself to do better. Whereas on the negative end, you are putting yourself down, you're telling yourself that you can't complete things, you can't achieve the things that you wish to achieve. Benefits to the positive side, you're going to have a higher confidence level, you're going to have greater self-esteem, oftentimes you're going to be a lot more relaxed, and you're also going to feel more capable to do things on your own. Whereas on the negative end, you lose all of those benefits and you come across a lot of harms. You tend to be less confident and you tend to be more anxious, which in turn affects your ability to complete things.
Mm-hmm.
It's great that you say that, because with the negative aspect, I really kind of want to focus on how you can turn that negative aspect into sort of a positive thing in your life. It doesn't while it is negative inherently, it doesn't have to be always used for a negative purpose necessarily. There's a lot of ways you can do it with using your negative self-talk to really identify stress or pain points that are in your life in general. And by identifying with that negative self-talk, you can move to work on them. It doesn't have to be big things. It could be little things in your life that cause you stress or different things like that. But it's a great way to find problems that really cause you that emotional stress and or pain in your life. And a great source by Julia Welke of the Eric Digest, 1993. She gives a really great point about how you can turn this into a positive, but she also keeps the constant reminder that while it's great to use the negative speak, there are times when that negative speak can turn into a sort of habitual nature where it's becoming a habit. You're using it a little bit too much. You start thinking in an all or nothing type of way, or a part of you starts to become more reliant upon negative speech, whether you realize it or not. And she really motions to use it in a constructive way rather than a destructive way, and to think about what these negative thoughts mean, or like what's prompting these negative thoughts, and to look at them with a better outlook, kind of using the positive side to redirect that negative into something good to produce.
So you're saying there's actually like positive aspects to negative self-talk, like in terms of like knowing where your stress levels are, what stresses you out, just basically knowing where you're at on issues, or like you said, it doesn't have to be big things, small things that piss you off.
Yeah, it can really be such a useful tool in your life if you can really learn how to use that negative speak outside of the inherent negatives, and learning to kind of, I guess, control it in a say, but manage it, to use it for better purposes.
I think it's actually very interesting and something that people actually won't think about. So it's actually insanely helpful information. But I think it's important to talk about what actually the Yami is actually probably most guilty for, which is the negative impacts of negative self-talk. I think perfect real life examples are sports and professional athletes. Now, the thing about both positive and negative self-talk is that even people that we as a society view as like the most high functioning, whether it's, politicians, professors, or athletes, they negative self-talk themselves all the time. In fact, they're probably up there with people that are the most guilty of it. And I think real life examples come with the yips when it comes to sports. For those that don't know, the yips is a condition where a professional athlete who's trained all their life to be a professional at this sport, so their mechanics are insanely fine-tuned, and they make a mistake. They make a mistake that they just wouldn't normally make. And whether it's a tennis player wide openly missing a serve, like it's nowhere near the service box, or it just straight up flies, a golfer missing a putt, a pitcher can't throw strikes, a second baseman misses a ground ball. Because they're so used to making that play for years upon years at this point, it makes them think about it, and they think about it to a point where eventually actually the mind actually kind of starts to take over the talent and the mechanics. Now, the yips has been extremely guilty for ending a lot of professional athletes' careers. But actually, as we come to find out, it's actually not the killer. It has the assist, but it is not the killer. So what happens is athletes are often groomed that if you have a problem, if you have a mechanical problem, it can be beat by doing physical stuff, working out, spending more time on the field, on the court, whatever. And usually it's actually not helpful. In this case, it actually might be beneficial for that athlete to take a step back. To take a step back and be like, okay, this is who I am outside of the sport, and recognize that maybe there's more important things in life, or whatever it may be. They need to detach their identity from that sport. So what happens is, that's not what happens. Their negative self-talk is telling them, you're not doing enough to beat this. So they go back to the gym, they go back to the facility or whatever, and they end up overexerting themselves, and they injure themselves. And the real killer is injuries. So, for example, if it's a pitcher that can't throw strikes, they'll work out, they'll put more stress on their tendons and their ligaments and their muscles, and then they'll be nervous and they'll death grip the baseball and throw all extended. That's asking for a UCL tear. So while the yips gets the blame for killing careers, the real killer is always negative self-talk.
That's really good, because it really speaks to where the mind is, the body will follow. It's really true that negative self-talk, it takes over your body, not just your mind. And I want to loop back around over to Allie and talk about or for her to start the conversation about developing the inner
Yeah, so
self-talk.
there's a lot of studies on the National Library of Medicine published in 2016, and that their research argues that there's 4 main ways that interpersonal communication actually does play into self-talk. Whether it be positive or negative, it's going to have differing effects, but it still plays in these ways. The first being it shapes your thought patterns. From the positive aspect, if you have a positive self-talk, you're more likely to have positive thoughts and positive outlooks. So, whereas with the negative, if you're speaking to yourself negatively, you're going to view things negative. The second one is that it influences your emotions. In the same way, if you have a more positive inner dialogue, you're likely to appear more positive on the outside. Whereas if you're more negative internally, you're going to come across negatively. That third one is it affects your decision making. There's a lot of studies on this article that show that when you are more positive in your self-talk, you have that greater confidence in yourself, which in turn leads to you applying yourself more to your decisions, to influencing you to do like bigger and better things. Whereas if you're negative and you're constantly talking down on yourself, you feel as though you're incapable of these things. That last one is that it impacts your personal growth, and it's for the same reasons that I just mentioned. When you talk to yourself more positively, you're more likely to make decisions that allow you to expand and grow as a person, whereas when you talk to yourself negatively, you tend to restrict yourself.
That's really interesting. I think it has a lot to do also with the younger years of your life and the formative years, because in those years you're pretty impressionable and you learn a lot of habits from either your parents, your guardians, whoever it may be in your life that plays a really big role. And these people can pass on these traits to you whether you realize it or not. You'll habitualize it, and if they're in a positive mindset most of the time, they can show you that traits, and you'll probably be more akin to having those traits. But if you're in a negative circumstance and you are surrounded by more negative speak, you're going to speak to yourself that way. And in doing that, you habitualize it, whether you know or not. And that's what really leads to a lot of later pieces in life where you have to start kind of thinking about, like, why do I talk to myself so negatively and so constantly in that way? And a great foundation for this I found was with Ruth Greger, and she did a study in the Nursing American and Nursing Journal in the 1991 version. And in this, she talks about how your self-talk is based on your beliefs, and it's your beliefs about yourself. So whatever you necessarily believe about yourself is probably going to influence how you talk to yourself. If you are thinking negatively about yourself, you're going to talk to yourself, and now you're going to put yourself down. And it really goes to attest to even just your self-esteem in general and your relationships forwardly out to other people. Because if you're talking to yourself negatively, you're not going to hold yourself in high esteem in those conversations, and you're going to have the confidence maybe in some parts of your life. And it's really such a strong point in your life, that interpersonal communication of how you talk to yourself and how you see yourself through that lens, that it's such a strong foundation to have, and you really require a good balance between the positives and the negatives, and knowing how to manage those two things, because they help so much.
It actually does tie into what I just talked about with athletes and the yips. Athletes that are more susceptible to the yips are athletes that were verbally abused as children, because their brain goes to a place where they're more comfortable when you're being talked down to, so they talk to themselves more negatively, and they have an altered view of themselves all the time.
Yeah.
And an inaccurate view.
For
Because
sure.
if it's all negative, it's never accurate.
It really just shows to tell how your upbringing has so much to play in how you think about yourself, and then how that translates. And it's such a strong task and difficult task to work on that. But everybody, once you work on it, it makes your life such a better thing. And so many different facets of life open up.
Yeah, it does. It sounds like just really unbelieving a lot of the things you were taught as a kid about yourself could really improve your self-talk, your yammy, because it's really just repeating what you've been told over the course of your life, and then what you start believing. So I think that is extremely powerful and a great point to point out. But before we tune out, is there anything else or any other piece of information that you all would like to share as far as your research? Like, what have we researched that is going to help us improve our yammies?
I just think it's always important to remember that we as humans, we talk negatively to ourselves way more positively. We say things to ourselves that we never even come close to saying to other people.
Mm-hmm.
So if we introduce more positive self-talk in our life, it will never creep towards an inflated ego type thing. It will just creep towards a more accurate version or more accurate view of ourselves, because it's always negative. It's always below what we know we can do. So increasing confidence, positive self-talk, it increases confidence, but also it leads us a more accurate view of ourselves, which is why it leads to better forms of communication in other areas, like teamwork and conflict resolution, as we said before, because you're going into it saying, hey, I know myself better, I'm more confident, I can solve this.
Yeah, that's really good.
I agree. I also think it's really important to note that change isn't instantaneous. If you catch yourself speaking negatively to yourself, you can't just acknowledge it and expect it to go away immediately. It's change. You have to there's a process to it. You have to slowly work your way up to speaking to yourself in a more positive manner. And even when you reach that place, it's not to say that you're never going to speak negatively to yourself. It's that you have to accept that when you do speak negatively to yourself, you have to understand there is a positive aspect to that as well. You can't constantly harp on yourself, but it's okay to do it every once in a while. You can't expect perfection from yourself if you can't expect it from others either.
That's amazing.
Yeah, for me personally, I really resonate with what you just said. And learning, it's a process. You learn to manage the negative and positive self-speak. And something to keep in mind is just being aware that you're doing it, being aware that you're speaking negatively to yourself in that way, because you're not always necessarily going to realize that you do it so often or so much. And in being aware, you can kind of strive to have a better balance and really extrapolate that out into the other facets in your life.
Mm-hmm. That's nice. For me personally, it's really to reprogram it by being around people who positively reinforce me. So kind of what we were talking about in the last section about developing and how it's developed in childhood. I'm just breaking free from all of that negative stuff in childhood and re-surrounding myself with positive people so that, when they're talking positive to me, it's feeding me good stuff to say about myself when I hear the negative stuff about myself. So that's just what I've taken away. But thank you all so much for your research and your input. I know I learned a lot from this. I hope y'all learned a lot from this. And I hope the viewers learned a lot from this as well. Again, thank you for tuning in to our podcast, The Authentic Communicators. We hope you enjoyed this show as much as we enjoyed putting it together. Again, I'm Camila, Allie, Dylan, Adam, and we out. Bye.
The exponential growth from the program from my first year to my third year now, that's what keeps me coming back and keeps me excited and just fulfills me as a person.
It's so impressive, and we every time we walk in here, you guys are doing something different. It's great. It's
nothing but opportunities here, and we have sports to cover, we have the equipment.
Because the more ambitious you are, the more opportunities you'll have.
On-the-job training is huge.
You get the hands-on experience.
When someone asks who can do it, you can raise your hand and say, I can do it. So
joining the class was the best decision I ever made.
Stand by, we're going to go to cut one. And cut one. Cross court to Audrey Jones. Audrey for three! It is good! With 1.3 seconds left on the game clock, Audrey Jones with one of the biggest shots ever.
the sky's the limit, really, with what we can do here.